more on women, and you also wrote a book related to them. So energy wise, men and women are different.
Mm. Well, it's really about these different levels of the subtle body. So you could say at the level of the subtle body that connects to spirituality, the Kundalini, there's no difference, right? Maybe even at the level of psyche, really, it's about we have different condition patterns. We've had different life experiences, maybe as
Yes.
men and women. But where there really is a difference is when you get to the level of the subtle body that's linked to the physical body. So, for example, in energy medicine, each of the main chakras is linked to a particular glandular system. So, the first chakra is linked to the adrenals. The second chakra, for women, it's linked to the ovaries. For men, it's linked to the prostate. And in physical medicine, that it's so interesting that the differences in our hormones actually impacts all the rest of our physical body, not just our reproductive system. Our hormonal differences have different differences in our heart health, differences in our brain health. You know, our physical body is a whole system. So it's really the same in terms of women's energetics. There's a level at which working with the chakras is no different for men
Okay.
and women, right? But there's a level where it is different because you have this physical
Hmm.
link. And for women, for example, we have a monthly cycle,
Hmm.
then we have potentially pregnancy and postpartum, then we have perimenopause and menopause. Men have cycles too, but for women, it's much more dramatic.
Yes.
And you see those energy, you see, we have much more dramatic energy shifts as well related to those physical
So,
shifts.
can you explain how the body energy changed during the different phases of a women's life? Because we definitely experience
Yeah.
a lot of turbulences as well at some point, and then it also impacts our physical health as well. So, can you explain those body changes energy wise?
Yeah. I think one of the most important for women to know about, women who menstruate, is the monthly cycle. And, you know, we have this hormonal cycle that's going, right? Every month. And our energy body, especially our second chakra, has this cycle of sort of opening and closing. And those days going into our menstrual cycle, our energy body is actually at its most sensitive. And so we actually, at that point, sometimes need a little bit more energetic protection or boundary work, right? If you're out in the world, maybe you need to isolate more. If you don't have that luxury of
Hmm.
isolating, there are things you can do with your navel and root chakra to sort of shore up your energy body because you're more sensitive at that time. And then we have this naturally emanating energy at the peak of our cycle. So learning to work with that energy can be very helpful. Then pregnancy is a fascinating time because really the second chakra or the sacral chakra is a spiritual doorway in the way that our physical body is the physical doorway for birth,
Right.
right? So there's this blissful energy that many women report that feels spiritual to many of them. And so that's a very interesting opening of the second chakra. And it kind of goes from there. Then postpartum, that door kind of closes, and a lot of women will experience this crash that is hormonal, but it's also
Right.
energetic. You now have a line to your children. You have an energy line to your children,
Hmm.
especially when they're very young. You have to learn how to manage that line. And then we get to perimenopause and menopause, where the whole cycle that you've had for 30, 40
Hmm.
years begins to first be very irregular and then stabilize. And so then you have to learn how to work with this new energy in a way that is empowering, but not rigid,
Right.
right? So that's kind of that was a very fast summary, but that's kind of, it's a lot, right? It's a lot of different shifts.
Definitely, because it takes a lot actually, and now that women are actually working and managing household and everything, so it is very essential for them to recognize how to balance their body energies. And that is why I want to specifically ask about the monthly cycles, because a lot of women are going to watch this. So what are your views when it comes to managing our energy during the monthly cycles? What can they do to balance their energies, and what are the chakras that they can work on? Maybe some techniques or some short methods where they can protect their energy fields.
Yeah. To some extent, it depends how a woman experiences it, but I would say the majority of women that I work with do experience this increased sensitivity
Hmm.
and sometimes fatigue going into menstruation, right? Like in those last few days before. We sometimes medically call it PMS, and there's hormonal, but putting that word aside, which some people don't like, right? Energetically, there's this sensitivity. What usually can benefit is focusing on the first and third chakras, which are on either side. The first being really linked to the tailbone, the legs, the earth
The
element.
root chakra, right?
And then the third in the belly linked to the fire element. And that really is our boundaries, right? And so this fire and earth energy, this first and third chakra, it's very stabilizing to focus on the two of them together. It really creates this sense of an energetic filter or shield.
Okay.
And you can really learn to cultivate that as a stabilizing force as you move into that, and an energizing force as you move into that phase of your cycle.
Right, the root chakra and the solar plexus chakra, the elements.
Yeah, I work more with the navel as the third and
Okay,
the
okay.
sacral lower as opposed to the solar plexus. But it's all the same chakra. It's just a matter of where do you focus? Do you focus on the bottom of it or do you focus a little higher? And different traditions do one or the other. So it's just a
Right.
preference for me.
And then you talked about
Mm.
postpartum, and it is
Yeah.
also a very emerging topic these days with like social media emerging, and people are talking about it. Maybe in our previous generations, like if I talk about the women around me, they never talked about such things. Maybe they faced a phase of dullness, or maybe some disturbances happening, but they never termed it like something. So the conversations are happening right now. And you also mentioned about the sharing of energy with the child. So how to deal with that and what actually it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big transition postpartum. Obviously, we know the obvious
Yeah.
things, right? You're not getting much sleep.
Right.
And you have a hormonal crash that occurs, right? So those are already a lot, plus physical healing from your birth experience,
Right.
right? So that's a lot already to be handling. And then in addition, you have your energy body trying to shift back.
Right.
And but it can't go back to how it was but pre-pregnancy, because you now have this energy line that they sometimes call those first 3 months after a baby's born the fourth trimester. You really are almost so linked energetically still to your child that it can feel that way energetically, and you sort of have to learn how to self-care, how to allow yourself some breaks when your baby is cared for by your partner or another family member, how to just sort of almost close the line and allow yourself to focus again energetically, if you choose to, on those lower chakras. It's like reclaiming your own energy,
Right.
right? And then and allowing yourself to do that. um, that also helps with sleep and things like that. So that's often what I'm working with postpartum. The other thing postpartum is there's meant to be this natural flow of energy upward, and the energy kind of pools during pregnancy in the sacral. And so it's like how we oftentimes I'm working with trying to get the energy moving up again. And sometimes it's like it gets stuck, and that's when a woman feels very heavy,
Right.
uh, very hard to get out of that feeling. So the upward flow will help.
And now that we have talked about women, so do men also have similar life transits?
You know, they really do. We now, there is this idea of male menopause that men actually go through a pretty also profound hormonal shift in their 40s where their testosterone begins to drop and their impacts their body. And so there is a shift and there is an opportunity there to really center into the heart and relate to the energy body in a different way. I think, though, for most men, the cycles are not as
Hmm.
pronounced, right? And they don't have this monthly cycle as much. I mean, we all have cycles to some extent, but not as profound a
Hmm.
cycle. But men tend to have, and this is a spectrum really
Right.
between men and women, but in general, men's energy bodies tend to be more anchored in the root chakra instead of the second, and they tend to be more
Okay.
rigid they tend to be more rigid. So with men, I'm often working about more flow
Hmm.
through the energy. because there tends to be a more fixed energy. So they have better
Right.
boundaries, but not as much fluidity.
Right. That is why, it is also somewhere I would, the social media memes and everything that women go through, like, mood swings all throughout the day, and men are more like this. So, yes. And
And there's pros and cons to both. There's pros and
yes,
cons.
definitely, there's
Yeah.
pros and cons to both.